Good afternoon and welcome to a webinar on Greening TVET in Western Balkans, organized by Regional Challenge Fund. Welcome and thank you for joining us today on this hot summer day. I guess it's hot wherever you are today. Before we continue, I would like to invite our colleagues from technical support to share a couple of details with us.
Thank you, Jelena. Dear attendees, welcome to the webinar on Greening TVET of the Regional Challenge Fund in the Western Balkans. To have a pleasant webinar experience, please follow this guide. To ask questions in written form during the webinar, you may use Q&A box located in the Zoom toolbar. To contact technical support or other attendees, choose the chat option located in the Zoom toolbar. When using the chat box, choose Everyone option located in the chat. Enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. I hope everyone understood part about interpretation. It's available. We have our lovely interpreters here today. And today we have also a couple of guest speakers. And a first one to give an opening word and to greet you in front of Regional Challenge Fund is Mr. Frieder Werman, team leader of the fund management unit of the Regional Challenge Fund. Frieder.
Thanks a lot, Jelena, for the introduction, and yeah, probably literally warm welcome from my side as well to all participants and as well the fellow panelists. We are happy to have this first event on Greening TVET. It will be probably one of several to come. At the RCF, maybe just a short introduction of the topic to the broader picture. The RCF is of course continuing to work on cooperative training and implement the projects here. But we have a couple of thematical aspects that we are going to bring in over the next couple of months, maybe years, in order to enrich a little bit the implementation of cooperative training projects. And one of those aspects is the greening of TVET or Green TVET and the incorporation of environmental and climate protection issues, the prioritization of energy efficiency in projects, and similar questions. On a global picture, we link a little bit up with the Sofia declaration, or the conclusion of the Sofia summit of the WB6 heads of governments a bit less than 2 years ago, where the green agenda was created as well for the Western Balkans, and also with the perspective of aligning policies and some activities with the overall EU agenda. So that is the big political background there, and especially as a KfW BMZ finance project, we pick this up, this topic as one of the as the first one of the thematical aspects, very much in line with the focus of the BMZ, the German Ministry for Cooperation and Economic Cooperation and Development, and the KfW, which are also promoting the climate protection, the conservation of natural resources, and a general awareness for environmental questions in their projects. This is the link with the green agenda, but I think, as the trailer has already indicated, we also think that the greening of TVET will contribute to making companies more competitive, and as well making graduates of the cooperative training programs more attractive and more interesting for companies. So having here a direct link to the mission of the RCF in improving the employability and as well the competitiveness of companies in the region. So there are probably many projects to come in the future, many initiatives, and one of our ideas is to introduce these aspects as well to the projects in the RCF. We have now started to integrate this slowly into the selection criteria, now with the second call, which is currently ongoing. There's one ambition criteria, which focuses on the green ambition, so to say, of a cooperative training program. And this is not a major part, of course, of selection, but it plays a role, and we'll have a look at it. And in this context, and also to give a certain input for the current applicants, but maybe also for already selected consortia on how to go about it, we have organized this webinar. Thanks, Jelena, for the most part of the organization, and so she has been the mastermind driving force behind it, and particularly grateful to Carina and Klaus-Dieter to give a couple of ideas of how that could look like, indeed, in practical terms, the screening of TVET, and what possibilities there are, even maybe with not too much of an investment to achieve a little bit along this green agenda. So saying this, hoping that this finds the interest of our dear applicants and members of consortia. And with this, for now, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Frieder, for this nice introduction. And indeed, we do recognize the importance of the topic of greening TVET. It has become more relevant than ever before. As you mentioned, the transition to greener economies creates an urgent need to talk about sustainability in VET curricula, and to discuss how economically relevant sectors in the Western Balkans 6 region, they also face certain ecological challenges, and they will have to transform in the years to come to achieve the goal of becoming ecologically more sustainable. So today we have invited numerous vocational education and training providers, enterprises, partners from chambers of commerce and international organizations to join us here today, and to learn and discuss the importance of greening TVET and what are the benefits of greening TVET for schools and companies. And we are very lucky to see that around 70 people decided to join us today, which is really a nice number, having in mind the summertime and and other activities that might come in the way of joining a webinar. We are very happy today to have two great speakers with us. We have Mr. Dr. Klaus-Dieter Mertineit. He's the Managing Director from the Institute for Sustainable TVET and Management Services, as one of the leading experts in the field, and his work focuses on TVET for sustainable development, TVET research, but also on quality management and organization, particularly in TVET institution, and he has a broad experience in Germany, but also international. Thank you, Klaus, for being with us today. And we also have our dear Carina Danker. She's the Director for Green Finance at IPC, and she has more than 15 years of experience in implementing projects that support financial sector in meeting its commitments under the Paris Agreement, and in identifying companies and projects that are themselves aligned with the Paris Agreement. So she has also been involved in the establishment and implementation of training programs in the renewable energy sector. So we have focus on enterprise side and focus on TVET side, and we will try to combine these two perspectives. And for the beginning, I would like to invite Carina to start and to tell us what expertise do companies need to meet their obligations for the Paris Agreement. And Carina, please, the floor is yours.
This is technical support speaking. Ms. Carina is not able to speak right now, so maybe proceed and then get back to her later on. Thank you.
Okay, then we will just change the order. Klaus, will you be willing to take over and tell us how could vocational training providers and partnering companies benefit from greening TVET? So we just changed the order.
Okay,
that's fine with you. Thank you.
We can do this like this. Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to share my ideas with you. The topic is, as already been said, is a question. I hope this can be seen.
Yeah, we can see your presentation.
How could VET providers and partnering companies benefit from greening TVET? To answer this question, I will first talk about why we need Green TVET and what we mean by Green TVET and green vocational competencies. Then I will talk about what requirements arise for TVET institutions from the global demands for sustainable development, as well as green vocational training. And I will show that these requirements are not fundamentally different from those faced by companies. In my opinion, these requirements create learning opportunities when VET providers and partnering companies work together in the spirit of Green TVET. To this end, I will present some examples. This in turn leads me to answer that initial question: how could VET providers and partnering companies learn from Greening TVET? So let us start with reasons and terms. In your region, the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans sets the development direction for the greening of the economy, for the creation of new jobs, and related to this, of new competence requirements. The Green Agenda for the Western Balkans contains a two-pronged endeavor: creating green industries, that means stimulating the development and creation of industries that provide environmental goods and services, and greening the economy, that means ensuring that all industries, regardless of sector, size, or location, continuously improve their environmental and social performance and to reduce their overall risks. Correspondingly, green jobs will be created in both traditional and emerging green sectors that contribute to maintaining, restoring, and/or improving the quality of the environment. To meet the requirements of these green jobs, the workforce must be qualified to competently carry out occupational tasks in the fields of action mentioned in the Green Agenda and above when we consider the EU as an accession perspective. This is the task of a cooperation between the business sector and VET providers. Thus, as we talk about green or greening the economy, we can also talk about green or greening TVET. Green always means a result, something is already achieved. So Green TVET is the vision, the result to be achieved after a long process of transforming TVET. Greening is the process towards green. So greening TVET means the step-by-step process of transforming TVET to become green. I think we are all in the process of greening TVET, not only in the Western Balkans, but also in Germany. What is the characteristic of green or greening TVET? It's an expression of a new perspective in vocational education and training and aims to promote green occupational competencies with which the working and living environment can be shaped in the sense of sustainability. The focus is on the ecological, social, and economic effects of occupational activity. Greening TVET takes the major global challenges seriously and tries to contribute to overcoming them. And Greening TVET contributes to achieving sustainability development goal 4, especially for 6, which is on education for sustainable development. In this respect, Greening TVET does not replace conventional TVET, but puts green issues at the center of vocational education and training. Accordingly, green or greening TVET does not reinvent the modern TVET approaches, concepts, and methodology, such as vocational competence, action orientation, the complete action model as reference, the orientation towards operational task and business processes, and cooperation of learning venues. These approaches and concepts are still valid. Green TVET uses them for its own goals and gives them new impetus. Green or greening TVET is more than just developing green skills. Green TVET implies not only a new perspective on content and subject, but also on didactics and infrastructure. Content or subject relation means in order to be able to act responsibly in terms of sustainable development in the occupation, concrete knowledge and skills are required, for example, about ecological or social implications of one's own occupational actions. Also, the development and use of new green technologies and processes are accompanied by changed or expanded competence requirements that have to be incorporated into initial and continuing vocational education and training. Pedagogical and didactical issues mean that new green competences require new forms of learning, which, for example, enable consideration processes and decisions in uncertain situations and promote participatory action and cooperative structures. And last but not least, infrastructure. The TVET providers and the entire TVET system itself are to be changed to orient themselves towards principles of sustainable development. I would like to start to talk about the subject content, the skills first. Green vocational competences are not only required in the so-called green sectors of the economy, but in the entire economy. What are green competences? According to the definition of an Australian VET organization, green vocational skills are technical skills, knowledge, values, and attitudes, which are needed in the workforce to develop and support sustainable social, economic, and environmental outcomes in business, industry, and the community. It's a very general definition. To go more into detail, we can divide green occupational competencies into cross-occupational green competencies, which are relevant for all occupations and training programs. And on the other hand, occupation-specific green competencies regarding correct occupational handling of new green technologies, materials, or procedures relevant for specific occupations and sectors such as renewable energies, electromobility, organic farming, waste management, wastewater treatment, and so on. I will explain these different competencies with examples from Germany. Let's first take a look at cross-occupational green competences. Cross-occupational green competences support the greening of the entire economy and therefore belong in every vocational training program. In Germany, cross-occupational green competences are summarized in the standard position environmental protection and the occupational profile of all occupations within our dual VET system. The aim is to avoid operational impacts on the environment within the occupation sphere of influence. First of all, this means being able to recognize and assess these impacts. Students should know and be able to apply relevant environmental protection regulations. They should be able to work efficiently in terms of energy and resources. And they should be able to avoid waste and be able to reuse and recycle substances and materials. Recently, this standard occupational profile item has been replaced by a new one. It is called Environmental Protection and Sustainability. It is considerably more ambitious than the standard position Environmental Protection. It says, recognize opportunity within own task areas for the avoidance of instance of environmental pollution and impacts on society caused by the company and contribute to the further development of these opportunities. During work process and with regard to products, goods, or services, accord due consideration to the economic, environmentally compatible and social aspects of sustainability when using materials and energy. Comply with environmental protection regulations, as these apply to the company providing training. Avoid waste and make the substances and materials available for recycling or disposal in an environmentally friendly manner. Develop proposals for sustainable actions in own work area and comply with company regulations whilst working together in the best interests of economically, ecologically, and socially sustainable development, and communicate in a way which is appropriate to the target group. Compared with the old one, we see that the style of the new profile item is different, but you will find more or less all of the included ecological aspects in the new one, but reformulated. New social issues are integrated, and the last two subjects are new. Develop proposals for sustainable actions and comply with company regulations and communicate this with the target groups. So these are examples of cross-occupational green competencies, which in practice have to be considered during the entire period of vocational education and training and related to the respective occupation in the respective sector. Let's continue with occupation-specific green competencies. To prepare students with occupation-specific competencies needed for occupational handling of green materials, technologies, and processes, in Germany, we look at occupations which have a proximity to these competence requirements. And we integrate new green competencies into these corresponding occupations in the form of possible specializations within these occupations. In the field of domestic supply engineering, we have an occupation called plant mechanic for sanitary heating and air conditioning systems. In the occupational profile of this trade, we have integrated competencies for the construction and connection of systems for rainwater utilization, as well as solar systems, heat pumps, and wood pellet systems in buildings. Automotive mechatronics technicians with specialization in high voltage systems acquire skills in the safe handling of high voltage system during their training and are thus the experts for the maintenance and repair of electric cars. Process mechanics for plastics and rubber technology with specialization in fiber composite technology can produce rotor blades for wind turbines. And this last one is the only initial training occupation in the field of wind energy in Germany. However, there's a further vocational training to become a service technician for wind turbines. But as I said, it's on further training level, not on the initial training level. Within the German dual TVET system, we have just 4 occupations in the field of environmental engineering. In the field of water supply, we have the water supply engineering technician. In the field of wastewater treatment, we have the sewage engineering technician, and we have the pipe, sewer, and industrial service technician who cleans, monitors, and maintains wastewater pipes and sewers. And finally, in the field of waste management, we have the recycling and waste management technician. These occupations have been developed and implemented at the urgent request of the industry and the public administration because there was no suitable occupation in the dual TVET system available that could be followed up with specialization. By the way, this does not mean that only jobs for these named occupations are offered in this area. That is far from being the case. However, applicants with these occupations are preferred at middle management level. For all other types of green specializations, training programs are offered at continuing education level. I already mentioned that. The decisive reason for this is to ensure employability. The broader the competence profile of a training occupation, the greater the chance to find a job on the labor market. Conversely, the higher the degree of occupational specialization, the smaller the number of eligible jobs. So it makes sense to specialize later. Let's go on to infrastructure, another part of Green TVET. Providing TVET programs with green skills required in the green or greening economy is quite a challenge, but not enough. The TVET institutions also have to become green and a role model for eco-friendliness. The motto is living what we teach and learn. The reason? TVET institutions cannot preach sustainable development and continue practicing their teachings and management in a conventional way. The basis for greening TVET institutions is a whole institution approach as propagated by UNESCO UNIVOC worldwide. And for international development cooperation, we have modified this approach somewhat, elaborated it in concrete terms, and published it with examples from South Africa in a GIZ brochure. So it's a well-established approach. Let me explain it a little bit more in detail. The Greening TVET institutions approach consists of 5 dimensions or fields of actions. The first is curricula and training that we have already discussed. The next is campus facilities and operation. That means permanently reducing the carbon footprint of students, teachers, and staff within the TVET institution. Based on the philosophy of practicing what is being preached, resources such as energy, water, and other materials are managed efficiently. The next is teaching methodology. That means explorative and action-oriented learning should be used as main teaching methods. Green buildings and technologies are used as learning objects and integrated into education and training. So there is a close link between these 3 dimensions. On the right image, you see a wooden energy-efficient building of a German vocational college, which is equipped with different solar systems, different kinds of solar systems. All these systems are included in training programs and further developed by students. So that's an application of these 3 dimensions in a vocational college. The next fields of actions are community and workplaces. That includes a close cooperation with local companies in the field of green skills development. And last but not least, institutional governance, capacity and culture means embedding sustainable principles into the management procedure of the TVET institution, training of staff on green issues, participation of all internal stakeholders, and combining a top-down with a bottom-up approach. From my point of view, the challenges for training providers and partnering companies are very similar, and therefore they can learn a lot from each other. For this purpose, I would like to compare, on the one hand side, the requirements arising from ISO 14001, which is on environmental management systems for companies, with the requirements arising for VET providers from the whole institution approach I just have explained. First of all, the companies and the ISO 14001. The ISO 14001 has the goal to enhance the organization, that means here, companies' environmental performance systematically. Essential elements are environmental policy, establishing an environmental management system with stock taking of the of the relevance of environmental issues and how it is already considered in the company, to develop and identify and develop strengths and weaknesses, develop an environmental program, implement it, monitor it, assess it, and further develop in the context of continuous improvement processes. Resources have to be given, task responsibilities and authorization has to be named, and important for us, competence development, awareness and communication has also to be considered in companies who are willing to use this ISO standard. What does it mean? Companies or organizations shall determine the competence required of persons who carry out activities on its behalf that affect the organization's environmental performance. They should ensure that on the basis of appropriate education, training, or experience, these persons are competent. They have to take measure where necessary to acquire the required competence and evaluate the effectiveness of the measures taken. Among other things, persons carrying out activities on behalf of the organization shall be aware of the significant environmental aspects and related actual or potential impacts associated with their work. I think that sounds similar to what we called cross-occupational green competences, doesn't it? When we now compare these requirements coming from the ISO standard with the whole institution approach, then we see that we have a similar goal, which is systematically include green issues in all fields of action of an VET provider. We should also develop an environmental policy. It's part of the dimension institutional governance. It's also a requirement to establish an environmental management system, but not that ambitious than the company. It's also part of the institutional governance dimension, but also is linked to all other dimensions as well. Resources, tasks, responsibilities, authorization is also considered in the whole institution approach, and competence development, awareness, and communication is more in the focus of the whole institution approach and is considered in all 5 dimensions. In Greening TVET, there are a number of informal formats that can be used to improve communication and cooperation between VET providers and partnering companies beyond formal structures. I would like to explain it by using some examples, which are roundtable and expert discussions, as well as explorations. Roundtable, expert discussion, and explorations are all active methods, not just meeting some experts or visiting a company and seeing what the experts will say and show. It's the other way around. Learners think about what interests them and what topics they want to hear and see about. Based on this, experts and companies are selected and informed about this approach because they have to agree. And then the talks or the explorations are systematically prepared, documented, and evaluated. And the experts or company representatives have to get feedback afterwards. So it's an action-oriented approach. To give an example from Vietnam, there we had developed a training program on green basic competencies. It has been done by a group of teachers from a vocational college. They did this in close consultation with representatives of the local economy. These were invited at the very beginning when it came to identifying relevant topics, to identify the duration and the basic didactic orientation. The first draft concept for the basic module was also presented to these company representatives, and comments from the company representatives were taken up in the further development of the concept. In order to get an impression of the environmental situation in companies, the teacher group prepared and carried out an exploration with expert interviews in a company and evaluated it with regard to the consequences for the basic module. So just to give an idea how cooperation can take place beyond the formal structures of learning venue cooperation. If the two learning venues, the VET providers and the companies, the partnering companies, cooperate in regard to training projects, then these cooperative training projects can be used to link green skills development and environmental performance improvement for VET providers as well as partnering companies. I would like to present two examples. Both are from Germany, and in both examples, the initiative came from VET providers. In the first example, this was a private VET provider. In the second example, a public vocational college. The first example is on efficient lighting systems. After students had been informed by their training provider about energy and resource efficiency in general, and in the workplace in particular, a group of trainees dealt with the unpleasant lighting conditions in some workshops in their training company. The trainees compared the investment costs and consumption costs of fluorescent tubes and LED lights. They found out that the payback of LED has improved significantly compared to recent years. Lighting with LEDs is also more pleasant and more individualized. The full light output is available immediately, and the environmental and resource impact is lower in comparison. The project team developed and submitted an operational improvement proposal for this purpose, and this was accepted by the management and included in the financial planning for the next routine replacement of the light sources for the corresponding workshop in that company. The second example is on a former caretaker's house on the school ground of a vocational college, which was renovated and converted into a learning medium for innovative and energy and building technology. The former caretaker's house was energetically renovated as a complete system according to the latest state of the art and converted into an energy autonomous education training and further training center. All the necessary and sensitive issues of energy efficient renovation are made accessible in that building. Close cooperation with manufacturing companies and regional craftsmen made it possible to test and establish highly efficient renovation standards, as well as energy-saving technologies. The fact that, among other things, 3 different ventilation systems, 7 different wall insulation systems, 5 different solar collector systems, and 2 different heat storage systems were installed means that different systems can be compared with each other, which would not be possible in a normal building. Regionally committed craftsmen and manufacturers were also involved in the project implementation. These companies provide vocational training and themselves and have actively involved their apprentices in the construction phase. Through the intensive involvement of school teachers and regional companies, they have identified very strongly with the educational project. In the first step, the didactic ideas of the teachers on the use of the building were worked out for teaching the 2 trades of plant mechanic for sanitary heating and air conditioning systems, which I already have mentioned, as well as electronics technicians for energy and building technology. The training occupations for other relevant trades, for example, roofer and bricklayer, are established at 3 other vocational schools in the region. The already existing cooperation with these 3 vocational schools have been intensified and consolidated through the implementation of the educational project. So these 3 other vocational schools also benefited from this project. Apart from the implementation in school lessons, the new building is also used by the crafts enterprises, on the one hand, for further training of their employees, and on the other hand, as a reference object for informing customers who are interested in energy-efficient building renovation. This brings me to the answer to my initial question. Remember, question was, web providers and partnering companies, can they benefit in several ways from the greening of TVET? And I would say yes, because of the following reasons. The learning venue cooperation is intensified, action-oriented and learner-centered teaching and learning methods gain momentum, more attractive. Students are trained closer to practice. Vocational learning can be oriented towards real company situations and assignments. Learners are offered the opportunity to participate in the company or school improvement process and experience self-efficacy. The environmental performance is improved, both for web providers and partnering companies. The quality of web programs will be increased. And last but not least, the public reputation of the participating institutions will be enhanced. That's from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mertineit, for this excellent presentation and showing different ways of how to engage in greening TVET, a whole institution approach, but then also important part of cooperation with companies. And we have some questions already arising, but I'll save them for the later. We want to hear also Carina. She did her. Thank you so much for being with us in spite of all technical difficulties and false fire alarms in Frankfurt, but we are back now and ready to hear from you. We have already, when Mr. Mertineit mentioned standards, ISO 14001, we heard from Dragana Bulatovic saying that she represents a company that deals with implementation and education of ISO standards. In addition to aligning their own business processes, they help other companies reach the standard and have an adequate impact on the environment. So here we are. This topic is definitely interesting for our audience and a good sentence to follow up with Carina and her insights from working with companies worldwide.
Yeah, Jelena, thanks a lot for the introduction. I believe that while I was away, all of a sudden you have been already introducing us, and I truly apologize, and thanks to Klaus-Dieter, who then spontaneously jumped in first. Yeah, while I was away listening to this fire alarm, I was thinking we completely missed out something. We urgently need much more fire rescue workers. With climate change ahead, we will be confronted more often and more commonly with the situation, and probably most of you have seen it, that yes, like lots of fire issues anyway across Europe. Yeah, so thanks a lot for inviting me here. For me personally, the region is super interesting. I had the pleasure to spend quite some years working in the region and implementing also projects in the region, specifically in the banking sector. And since more than 10 years now, I have the pleasure in actually greening the financial sector. And as the sector is so much embedded so much embedded in like working with the private sector, of course, I'm witnessing an interesting process, like in the talk of the banks, with like the companies, this discussions have become much more greener. And I hope I will be able to first enlighten why that's the case, and then also to show some examples to what we have seen so far, where companies perhaps would need definitely more expertise in future to not only respond to the needs of the financial sector, but also to become more competitive in furthermore, hopefully greening environment. I will be sharing my screen, and I hope you will be able to see my screen. Could you shortly confirm, please, Jelena, if that's the case? Yes.
Yes, we can see.
Very good. All right. So yes, at IPC, you know us perhaps like from implementing, of course, TVET projects, very interesting TVET projects working in the area of skill development. But one of our other expertises is the work on, let me activate that. Can you still see it? In like the area of green finance, where we are directly engaged in the financing process of the further greening of the economy, but also developing green projects and uncovering hence the demand for those green finance at the side of the companies. That also includes like lots of impact analysis and expertise on carbon reporting, and the areas we are working in, it's like specifically the mitigation side and the adaptation side when it comes to climate finance. Perhaps a very quick explanation here. With mitigation under climate change, we understand like anything you and your companies do in order to emit less carbon dioxide, so to use less energy, replace perhaps current energy sources with renewable energies. And on the side of adaptation, we understand everything what companies would undertake in order to cope better with the current impacts of climate change. To give an example, perhaps here from the agricultural side, I'm not so sure if agriculture is so well covered under our TVET companies here. For example, investing in efficient irrigation systems in order to cover this pronounced drought periods we have currently, I think, across all Europe, including the Balkans. And then on the other side, and here perhaps also the link, you have heard it, 14,001, Klaus-Dieter mentioned it, we have one company here being present. What we also help specifically on the side of the financial institution is in like on their end developing processes and procedures for environmental and social risk management, but also here we would include the climate risks, as we have just been, as I have just indicated, environmental management internally. I count my impacts, I know what I use of, and I develop strategies to reduce my resource usages, including energy here. I have perhaps even enhanced specifically for larger companies my corporate governance structures to be able to cope with the climate and environmental relevant questions, which also are exposed now from the side of policy, and I am able to report on this. And this reporting will be becoming more and more important, because it won't be only asked perhaps back from the governance structures, but also specifically more on the banking side. Perhaps a little bit, so where does this all come from, right? We are discussing so much about green economy. We spoke about perhaps Paris Agreement, you know, about the United Nations Sustainability Goals. It was also in our teaser to this workshop. In 2015, and I would call this one of the latest international milestones, the world community came together in Paris and was for a long time, after many years of negotiations, finally able to set up an agreement, which is now known under the Paris Agreement term, where it set targets and obligations, but also ways forward on how to finance those. So we have on the one hand targets and obligations by each of the members, including the states, of course, being present here today in the webinar, but also would provide a way forward on how to finance this restructuring of our economy, to fill a good pot of money in order to allow companies to get their rebuilding and internal restructuring processes financed, right? Most of you, I don't know how many companies are present here, would know that investing into a new production line in order to also reduce resources and energy in the end is of course a costly process. So there is dedicated financing available for this. On the side of the EU, and it's your region's nearest partner and also a trading partner, the EU set in 2019 the European Green Deal. That was then the straightforward mission, how to restructure and rebuild the economy in order to meet the EU's agreed obligations and targets under the Paris Agreement. And as you can see here, give me a moment for the laser printer pointer here. We have a lot of laws put in place, but literally all areas of the economy are like confronted with new targets and challenges. And despite the fact that most of your countries are no part of the EU, we have agriculture with new targets, we have of course transportation targets, we want to rebuild the industry towards greener production processes, and there should be financing also selecting rather those projects which are aligned to those policies. Despite the fact that most of your countries are no part of the EU is going to set up mechanisms, and perhaps the one or other have learned this already, which is the carbon border adjustment mechanism, that in future also external carbon emissions will be considered for products coming into the EU. So here then also EU policies further having impact to their trading partners in future. But your own country's targets and obligations also lead to many obligations, but also a lot of opportunities for new learning and for more efficiency targets in each company and sector. So what exactly are we looking at when we are looking at companies from the private sector? There is on the one hand, like pronounced reporting obligations, and you will see this also from the banking sector in future, that there is much more asked in terms of what is your carbon and environmental information on your business side. So what's the carbon you're emitting in total for your business activities, and then also on the side of products. We see in all countries, independently of whether this is EU or not, restructuring of the energy market. So there is a pronounced investment into renewable energy, and the countries need to find new policy and regulatory ways to include also a decentralized energy production. Perhaps the one or other has already invested into solar PV, for example, and is feeding this electricity into the grid or using it for own consumption purposes. And then I have mentioned it, there is the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which at the end will oblige any company who wants to export to the EU, or like from the EU side, like the EU would import their products, would have to register the carbon emitted to produce those products under a dedicated register. So on the side of enterprises, when we have been discussing, there's lots of challenges coming up. Customers become more aware, so they need to find new strategy to respond to this. And there is also like strategies to find on how to reduce carbon in order to not come above a certain threshold, for example, or at least to have the knowledge on where to invest and how to invest in certificates to offset the current carbon emissions. On the skills side, I would like differentiate between two types of skill sets. There is on the one hand, there's a bit more science-like skills. So company employees, and we have been mentioning ISO 14001, you see below, need to become more used to the collection and the monitoring of environmental data and to managing data set and analyzing such data sets. And then on the other hand, of course, there is skill sets which come along with the green engineering and specifically technology skills, which come from new industries. And I think Klaus-Dieter has mentioned those already and given examples of those, but also from internal industry changes, and we have mentioned those before. There's renewable energy and also hydrogen technologies or the electromobility, and I think that's at least in some countries one of the very pronounced and known examples. So out of this, there is like certain knowledge sets which come across industries. So all industries need to enhance their knowledge on environmental management, to understand what is meant with sustainable practices. There is under the EMAS scheme, but across the world available the ISO 14001 scheme. I mentioned already data collection is one. You need to be aware about the carbon accounting practices, carbon accounting and collecting carbon information, and including this into the company's financial overviews needs to be learned. There is knowledge on new policy requirements, like many more regulations have been set up depending on the sector. This is a bit more pronounced or a bit lesser on the service side, perhaps a little bit lesser on the production side and energy side, and also agricultural side a little bit more. And of course, with that coming up more regulatory aspects. So a lot of permanent learning, the permanent learning challenge needed here. And then on the other side, there is specialist knowledge required. So companies would need to have perhaps energy managers who are certified under 50001, or like having even an energy management system in place certified under ISO 50001, energy auditors who can then also do better diagnosis of the potential savings. Again, like a carbon accounting specialist also quite needed, where things come together, not just collecting on the one hand, but really bringing it together and bringing this out. There's renewable energy specialists and of course, legal specialists, which are like engaged in greening the overall regulatory frameworks. I would like to enhance this setup a little bit on the example of renewable energies. What does it really need? So where perhaps additional skill sets and where is additional specialists also required. And Jelena has mentioned before, we are sometimes engaged in like setting up capacity building programs on entire country basis, and that is a bit also then the setup we are working in. So there's on the one hand the public sector, and on the countryside who really need to start redesigning the legal and regulatory energy framework, like setting new targets, having mind like what and where the energy market can be restructured, set up approval processes for the newly expected energy providers and energy producers of the country. And for example, like having specialists who can handle those new energy providers also on the transmission network side. If that is under public hand, it can be also sometimes privatized. Then there is the private sector who on its end needs to be informed about the new approval processes, permission requirements, needs to know what does it take all over to develop such a renewable energy project. You need companies or specialists who are able to design such a renewable energy plant, be it now from solar PV or from biogas, and who knows then how you can certify the saved carbon emissions and under which schemes, for example, in order to also translate this into other monetary advantages. And then, of course, there is the financial sector, who on its end would need energy project finance experts or like experts who understand this green energy advantages already and know how to build products around this, and then is also able to report back what kind of projects the banks or the financial institutions have been financing under their carbon accounting and reporting schemes. Another example, if you look at the side of production companies, and that is often a challenge also for the financiers to get the relevant information back. There is a lot of general knowledge schemes which need to be followed up. There is on the one hand, again, the green policy and the general savings potential of an industry to know about. There is climate change related risks, specifically, for example, for water intensive productions. I'm not sure to which extent most of your countries have been already hit by water shortages, but certainly the one or other company here would like to find alternatives and long-term planning strategies. Most countries have been starting to set up circular economy and resource efficiency regulation packages. And here we need new knowledge on the side, for example, of packaging engineers, those who are responsible for designing the packages for the production and have to take into consideration like standards for recyclability or even a more advanced return system. It requires new knowledge on the side of production managers who have to design products which are aligned with circular economy and resource efficiency obligations, such as that products need to be repairable, they need to be ideally able to return to the company, and the company needs to set up parts of their production lines in order to reuse, for example, broken products. And then knowledge on sector coupling, if perhaps some of production residues, such as paper leftovers from one production cycle, can be used in other sectors as raw material input, tissue or toilet paper production, for example. On the energy side specifically, there is like a lot of challenges when it comes to identify savings potential. We mentioned before there could be ISO 50001 environmental energy management system certification, but also, for example, knowledge then on replacement potential such as heat recovery and renewable energy. And then on the general side of the companies, they need to start dealing with the accounting, on the accounting side with the costs of carbon. I have mentioned this before, but also being able to report their emissions successfully. And then I would come to my last example before we hopefully can go into an interesting discussion also. This is agriculture, and I'm mentioning agriculture specifically because it comes with very particular own challenges. Yes, again, similar here, it needs specific expertise on those who have been setting up and working on the agricultural regulatory framework of the country in order to make the agricultural sector fit for climate change and fit to also further export successfully agricultural products. That needs to be embedded so that it gets also clear guidelines. And then on the other hand, hand in hand with those, like being able to either apply certification schemes which are already existing on international or European level, but also developing own certification schemes in countries for the regional and for the local market. The companies themselves and those who are in contact perhaps, but also small to medium-sized agricultural farmers, leaving alone those larger agricultural cooperatives, would need to start thinking on how to make the business more climate resilient, stronger against climate change impact. And here, for example, learning the application of this technical knowledge on IoT, so like smart technologies which are measuring and then also bringing back right information to use less water and water where it's really needed, or also fertilizers where it's really needed, and perhaps rebuilding the agricultural practices within a company towards more climate change resilient, but also at the same time less carbon intensive, like for example no-tilling applications. And then it repeats here, and you will see that's really across all the sectors. Yes, you will need to know what's your carbon you are emitting on your production side, and then being able to provide information at the end also to the financial sector back, so that they can use it also for their own portfolio reporting. Yes, and with that, I'm finishing, and we hope still to have an interesting discussion, despite that you now have to recall back what Klaus-Dieter has already said on how all this could find the way into your TVET interventions.
Thank you so much, Carina, for this interesting presentation and for listing all these skills that you already are witnessing as being in shortage among companies that you worked with. And we see that some of them are specific, but some of them are quite common. And speaking about skills anticipation, and this is an area that intrigued one of our participants, Mrs. Sidita Dibra. She said that the green skills and jobs are indeed crucial in the frame of climate change efforts and SDG achievements. And nevertheless, quite often it is not clear on jobs and skills expected to rise due to this mega trend. We see what's going on now, but it's another challenge to anticipate. And she posed a question, but I think this question is interesting for both of our speakers. Maybe to ask Mr. Klaus-Dieter first, for Carina to catch a breath after a presentation. What is your experience in skills, jobs, anticipation? So qualification systems are proactive in preparing qualified workers and fast to close the gap between private sector needs and offer. Do you encounter any of these examples in your experience, perhaps?
Yeah, first of all, I think we cannot start with especially cross-occupation or with occupation-specific green skills when there's no need in the economy, and if there are no economic sectors addressing skills needs, then we cannot start in the TVET sector to develop green skills in this area, meaning dealing with special green technologies, procedures, materials. But what we can do is to start with cross-occupational green skills that we can do anyway. So even if the companies are not that good in environmental protection at the moment, the TVET institutions can work as role models. They can start with their own institution and say, how can we deal with energy and resources more efficiently? What can we do to avoid waste, and how to start a waste management system, how to deal with hazardous substances correctly? And this example, which I presented from Vietnam, this basic module, by the way, was just on these issues. And they took the TVET institution as the framework, and the students had to check in the institution, what can we do? How is the situation? What can we do to improve the situation? But they made improvement suggestions, and this was included into the training. So there was a win-win situation. The students started thinking about green issues. They learned something there, and also the TVET institution started the greening process, just from a low level, of course. That can be done. And what we have done in Germany, by the way, when we started thinking about sustainable development and skills development, and then in the beginning, we didn't know what to do. So we developed so-called sector-specific actors conferences. So we invited a lot of representatives of different stakeholders relevant for a special sector, for retail, for example, companies representatives, scientific organizations, trade associations, trade unions, and so on, and discuss that. What's coming up? What should we start first? What are the steps, and so on? So, and then it took some years when we really were so far that we could really start providing training on this. But that was a good idea, I think, to involve the economy into these, to find a solution for this question.
Thank you, thank you. So it's one thing to talk about developing curricula and programs that include green skills for climate relevant occupation, but as you mentioned, sometimes it can be more efficient to just add modules to existing training courses to address cross occupational competencies, and that would be one of the takeaways. Thank you. Carina, skills anticipation from the side of, from companies' perspective, would you like to add anything on that?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree to what Klaus-Dieter said. I think for companies itself, it's sometimes difficult to long-termly anticipate the school system, and I think the education system per se, so those which like built as a curricula, I think they can do still a little bit more than only starting internally and setting up on their own parts, because we do of course see from the policy developments and from the discussions which direction things go, right? And I think if we now start integrating climate change questions and those challenges which are coming into the curricula, so that people are aware, which are going then later into the companies, which the companies receive as workers, perhaps, that still makes sense. I think so. It can be a little bit anticipatory in terms of how is the curricula, and is it this future directive, and integrating perhaps this discussion questions a little bit more. And we often see that then projects and relevant implementation, of course, get stuck, because if we start very late educating like renewable energy specialists, and now I'm being a bit broad here, right? So on these different areas, we simply lack, of course, on all sides expertise, and then it takes this curricular time until the experts are being there ready for the market. So the question for me is a little bit, do you plan this as a company? Probably not, but then is the question, can there be offers to skill up current workforce, which I think is super important, because you don't need simply a complete new training, perhaps it just needs to be changed a bit and you need to enhance, and those enhancement offers I think could come perhaps a bit faster, or being there in order to yeah, follow up on those new trends.
Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting the importance of upskilling or perhaps reskilling. There are numerous projects dealing with employees in industries with, which needs to be transformed toward the greener technologies, and this is very important topic, and perhaps during one of the next webinars we can tackle that a bit deeper. I'm looking into chat and into question and answers, and I don't see any new questions or comments. So at this moment, we would like to just invite our participants, if there's anything else you would like to share or ask our panelists. Otherwise, we can start with closing words to wrap up our discussion. And I think what was interesting for me is that when we spoke about both sides, VTIs and companies, we are talking about training opportunities for staff, and for teachers, cooperative training coordinators, but as well as for the students. And at the same time, there's a need for upskilling and reskilling of employees. And we discussed some modalities and how to do that, new training programs or updating the existing ones. And this is something that was really brought to our attention, and something that can be explored through the projects that we as RCF support. Anything else from the side of our speakers that you would like to add as a closing words? No? Frieder?
Unmuted now. No, nothing in principle. Thanks to Carina and Klaus-Dieter. And what I think what I took from it now is indeed that there are also fairly small things that can be added to training courses, maybe existing ones, or to profiles of certain professions, which already could make a big difference. I think we should take this to our consortia without making it too big and too complicated and too high of a hurdle, but rather something practical, small, and yeah, maybe we'll come back to with detailed questions to the two panelists now how that could look like. But I think that's yeah, that's probably the most promising way right now, without making it too much of a huge project now for our applicants.
Yes, thanks for highlighting that. And there was a couple of questions asking about recordings. And yes, we did record the webinar, and we will upload it to our YouTube channel and share the link with you, and also with all those who wanted to join us today but probably couldn't. So thank you from my side as well to Carina and Klaus-Dieter, and to our lovely translators, interpreters, and technical support. And we hope to see you soon again, and continue to discuss this important topic. Have a great day and nice summer.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.